Well, Pasadena High School had about 2,200 students, and when I got there, it had about a third of the students were African American, a third of the students were Latino, maybe a quarter of the students were Anglo, and then you had a segment of the student body that was Vietnamese, Hmong, Southeast Asian, and Asian. The student population came from the three lowest socioeconomic categories. It was a Title I high school, and it had the largest student foster home population of any high school in the state of California. The general student population was 2 or more years behind grade level. You had 30% of the kids who came into the 9th grade were socially promoted. In other words, in the middle school, they hadn't completed the requirements to leave middle school. You had 40% of the students receiving D's and F's in their core academic subjects. The school reported a dropout rate of about 8%. But when I looked at the number of students coming into the high school in 9th grade and the number of students we were graduating, it was clear that the dropout rate was anywhere from 30 to 40%. The classes were unfocused, not very engaging. The students weren't prepared to do the level of work that was being presented to them. And I also found that, in some sense, the administration had given up. And that I had to work at both levels with it. So I had to find what the focus should be. One of the heads of the teachers union in Pasadena Unified School District is also a teacher at Pasadena High School, and a very talented, good teacher, difficult for a principal to deal with at times, but certainly one that anyone could acknowledge knew his math and was very good. And then I asked him and another person from the math department if they would go back to New York and spend some time looking at this program. I said, all I can do is read the literature on it. I'm not a mathematician. I need to know from you whether what is appealing to me you think is actually possible. So I sent 2 people back. Again, I have to say, to New York, to spend time with the people who had developed this program, and then to be in some of their schools, because what was very important to me is how was it working on the ground and what were the glitches. At the same time they were doing that, I was obviously talking to the developers of the program, but I was talking to the principals of the schools that were a part of the trial in implementing the program. And they went and spent a week back in New York, and I was so pleased because they took it so seriously. But I also said to them, because neither one of them had really spent any time in New York, I said, I want you to have a good time too. I want you to learn everything you can and be honest with all of us about whether you think this would be good for kids. But also I want you to enjoy yourself. And I think that that double message was a very important one. And so they saw plays, and they went to museums, and they were in the schools, and they could come back and talk unbelievably about the strengths of the math program and what their worries were for us in implementing it. And so it was they who sold the program to the math department. I didn't. I could only position it for the possibility, but they were the respected math people. Certainly I wasn't. And so, you know, they warned me of the difficulty of implementing the program because you had to have 2 different teachers. We didn't have enough math teachers to begin with. How was I going to double the math faculty in the school? They recommended that we started as a pilot. They wanted to know that it was going to work before they were willing to turn the school upside down. I was of 2 minds on that. I thought that it was almost unconscionable to continue to do the same thing we had been doing. at the same time is I knew that this was going to cause an enormous change for a lot of people. So we went the first year with a pilot of about 60 kids, and the results were phenomenal. And so the program sold itself. And in retrospect, even though it was unconscionable that another group of kids who should have been in this program did not get the opportunity to it, it made it more possible for people to accept what was the inevitable. And the inevitable is when you're going to put 600 students in a double period of math, you're basically going to be doubling your math faculty. Well, Pasadena Unified School District was not going to give me 15 more teachers so that I could have a stronger math program. And so I had to find what we called the FTEs, or full-time equivalents, within my own budget. And of course, when you put students in a double period of math, it means that they can't take something else. So that something else that they were taking was being taught by teachers who would no longer be needed to teach that. So I had to figure out where we were going to get these positions and what programs we were going to let go of. And no matter how much you want to do it all, there are some very hard choices that you have to make, sometimes not very pleasant choices. And it was constantly important for me to remind myself that why we were doing this. And it wasn't for the adults. It wasn't even for their parents. It was for the kids and the opportunities that they needed. So we ran an elaborate vocational technical program. I had about 6 buildings devoted to this. And it was clear that they were dead-end programs. First of all, the school had not kept up the facilities and had not kept current. And I brought Honda in to evaluate our automotive program and the printing industry to evaluate our printing program. And I could go on. But basically, the message was all the same. You know, Honda said to me that the only thing that you really can do is teach kids how to change a tire because you don't have anything else going for you with the equipment that is needed. So basically, I just said, this is miseducative and that we needed to close down these programs. And it was through doing that I would get many of the positions to support that. But the problem was, at one level you can say that's absolutely the right decision. But the other level, many of the teachers in those programs were fabulous people, were people who loved kids, who would welcome kids into their shops that other teachers never wanted. And so it was some of the finest human beings that you were saying that, you know, I'm sorry, even though you've given 20 years to Pasadena High School, you're no longer going to have a job because you're not credentialed to teach what we need to have taught. I found this, even when I think of it today, I think, I know I made the right decision for the kids, but I made a lousy decision about very good people. And it's very hurtful today because these people have names and faces that they're not just abstract people, they're people that you come in contact with all the time. And so even though I offered them the opportunity to go back to school for us to pay for it, most of and they were men, most of them were later in their careers, and they didn't want to do it. You know, I only had one person take me up on it. When I was trying to build the core academic program at Pasadena so that kids would be known both as people and as learners. Many high school students will tell you today that they're no more than a pair of jeans walking down the hall. And I wanted these kids desperately needed to be known. And in order to do that, you had to have continuity. And what happens frequently, or most of the time in California, the last period of the day is a sports period, and then anything you can fit around it. And so the coaches are assigned to their sport that they're coaching. And the students who are in that sport, whether it be swimming or water polo or football, it's not one or the other, they're all assigned to the last period of the day. So you couldn't put anything important in that period. So if you have a 6-period day, it means that you actually only have 5 periods to schedule. So I knew I was going to have a problem scheduling these double period math classes if I only had 5 periods to actually schedule them. But I also knew that we would reschedule the school at the beginning of the year and the end of the year and the middle of the year. So twice a year you scheduled the school because you had to accommodate the students who were on a fall sports team or winter sports team, a spring sports team, and you had to accommodate those coaches, many of whom were academic teachers in the high school. And so what I found I was doing is creating I had a master schedule that rotated around interscholastic sports, which made no sense to me whatsoever. And the most upsetting thing to me about it was that a student would begin English with one teacher and halfway through the year would not have the same teacher in English because either that teacher went out to coach or that student went out to a team, or because of having to reschedule the whole school, the student got scheduled out of the same teacher. And so this was, every superintendent and high school principal knows that you don't fiddle with the sports program. And I couldn't figure out how to achieve the academic results without doing it. And I really wanted to because I'd taken on enough and I didn't need to bring down the interscholastic athletic community on my back. But I couldn't figure it out. And I talked to the head of the athletic department at my high school, who was a terrific guy. I talked to coaches, most of whom were just terrific. And they understood the problem. They couldn't recommend a way around it, but they certainly didn't want me to change things. And I talked to the students about it. I talked to the parents about it. I talked to teachers. And everyone just said, "Oh, Judy, that's just the way it is. You're doing enough. Don't deal with this." But I couldn't not deal with it because I couldn't make the other things happen if I didn't do it. So after tons of discussions, I made the decision to roll over the master schedule and not change it in the middle of the year, which meant that coaches who were going to coach a spring team like baseball or soccer, tennis, whatever, they couldn't be reassigned from their class that they were teaching in English or math and to the sports class. They had to continue to teach that period, the last period of the day. And, chaos broke out. I had a 3-day student and many faculty walk out. The TV cameras were there. And I knew that it would cause problems, but I didn't have any idea this was the level of difficulty that I would have. And I was very fortunate to have an African American superintendent who really wanted to see kids of color have better opportunities. And so he supported, he wished that it would go away, but he supported the decision. And at the end of it, we did reach what I thought was a very fair compromise. I only wish I had thought of it before the chaos. And that is that we would roll over the master schedule and we would hand schedule as many students as we could for the last period, sports periods, but we would not change the teacher schedules who were coaches. And it was a compromise. It was a fair compromise. And it didn't interfere in any way with the continuity of learning and teaching for kids. The performance of the students increased dramatically. I don't think we had good measures, I have to say that, but I had to use what was available. The best measure we had was the test that CMSP put out. But that wasn't good enough because we needed to look at how the students were doing on, unfortunately, at the time, the nationally normed test. And Pasadena was using the SAT-9 at the time. I think it was the SAT 8 that became the SAT 9. And our students entered Pasadena High School around the 22nd percentile on that. And when I left, they were at the 57th percentile. Pasadena High School went from the lowest performing high school in Pasadena across the board to the highest performing. And the number of AP classes we institute, I think, quadrupled. The goal was to get as many kids as possible in higher level classes to create a core academic program that was aligned and made sense and engaged kids. And I think we were successful in doing so. Providing kids with opportunities that the kids that I had in Scarsdale and Bronxville had became compelling to me. I just saw the issue between the haves and have-nots. I saw the kids who needed the most get the least. The kids who needed the least get the most. And I was out to make sure the kids who needed the most got the most.